It's that time. It's another restaurant roundup with an expert from the restaurant business. This time we've got a host of a podcast. We've got Tobie. What's going on?
What's up, Matt? How are you?
I'm doing amazing. So, Legends and Lies of Launching a Restaurant Podcast. I came across it.
Yeah.
First, tell us about you, and then tell us about the podcast.
Well, I grew up in the business, really a lifelong restaurateur. My first job was filling coleslaw cups in my father's fried chicken joint when I was 10, I think. And then I graduated to being a bartender at 14. So it's been around for a long time. I've been with some big groups, like I was at the beginning of Let Us Entertain You in Chicago.
Okay.
And have worked with Green Mill and some other chains up here in Minnesota. And I've been consulting really most of my career. Every once in a while when I was younger, I got scared and went to work for somebody. But otherwise, I've been a consultant. And then about 2 years ago, I decided to kind of play with podcasting. And I did a few podcasts. I started developing my style, so to speak.
Yep.
And then when my consulting business started to dip, even pre-COVID, I decided that, well, maybe I'll give podcasting a try for a career and see what that shift is like. And as it's been snowballing now, I'm still looking for solid sponsorship, but the amount of guests that are asking me to be on my podcast is increasing every day. Just did one yesterday. I posted one the day before, and I've got 3 in the can that I'm ready to edit to get up hopefully within a couple of weeks. So
now, for people that haven't seen the podcast, tell us about Legends and Lies. Are they interviews with operators, general managers, or what?
Sure. Well, Legends and Lies of Launching a Restaurant really started, like I said, when I started this a couple of years ago, was going to be a place where I could just have conversations with anybody involved in the restaurant business, okay, and especially involved with startups, with people who've built restaurants. Yeah. So I've done owners, I've done chefs, haven't really gotten down to some of the lower echelons of the business yet, but I've kind of stretched out to the outer reaches. I've done designers, architects, even had a pest control guy on once. So and now as I'm kind of developing more about the business, about the podcast, I'm doing more about restaurants. It doesn't necessarily have to be restaurants that we're just opening, although that's what I'm getting a lot of from PR people getting a hold of me. They want to kind of push their brand a little bit.
Yeah.
But when COVID hit, I pivoted to that to talk about what restaurants are doing to survive and thrive, hopefully. Yeah. And then when George Floyd was murdered here in Minneapolis, I kind of pivoted to the racism and sexism issues that kind of were very quiet in the restaurant business, but existed nonetheless. Yeah. And I've had 3 really focused conversations so far, and I've got a couple more planned coming up here in the future. So
cool. So let's dig into some of those items. And there's I'm sure a billion topics. It was kind of comical you mentioned interior design. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day. He's a client and a friend. He's got a bunch of restaurants. And I know 2 guys that have the same brand, different locations. Well, when the one gentleman, Patrick, went to launch his location, the corporate office gave him the layout, the colors, and he's like, no, that's not going to work. And the one big thing was white tabletops and white chairs. And it was ironic he mentioned that because yesterday I go to lunch at one of his another guy I know who owns the same brand, who actually had bought the franchise. The guy before him went with the white on white. And I'm sitting there, and the chair across from me had these giant black boot prints on it where somebody had used the chair to stand up and turn the now open sign on and put it back. And I remember Patrick telling me, like, dude, I would never put white chairs next to white tabletops. They're never going to match. You're going to get dirty. And here I am in a restaurant, same brand with that happening. Sure. So that, to me, I think there's a lot of things out there that franchises, especially, that when people buy a franchise, they think they're going to get the space, follow the spec the franchisor gives them, turn the lights on, unlock the door, and it happened.
Well, yeah, no, the restaurant business is the restaurant business. You're going to have to work hard at it, whether somebody gives you the concept or not. And I know a lot of franchisees who have enjoyed the process. They're doing well. They've done well. The franchise has been honest with them, which is always the biggest problem.
Yeah.
There's a mistrust that sometimes exists between franchisee and franchisor, especially in the beginning stages of the franchise development, when people are starting to grow stores, ideas. They rely on people to help them along by buying franchises, and sometimes these franchisors just aren't forthcoming completely with all of the knowledge that they promised they would, and sometimes their royalties stake is a little higher than it probably should be, especially in the beginning. So you do struggle a little bit when you're a franchisee. Even though your money's coming in, there's a lot going out, and it settles out eventually. Once you get up to, if you're a franchisee, you get 2 to 3 stores going, then you're going to start making some money. Just like in the independent world, it's really the way restaurant structured, the finances are structured for restaurants. It's almost impossible to make money anymore. With 4 to 5% net profit, which is what kind of an average of an independent restaurant. It's no wonder that we're losing all these restaurants because of COVID.
Yeah. A lot of them were too thin, and I've always said that I think there was too many restaurants before COVID. It was too easy. There wasn't a big enough barrier to entry in some concepts, and so you had a lot of people get in the restaurant business. Like, if I got in the restaurant business tomorrow, it probably wouldn't end well in 6 months. And unfortunately, there were a lot of people like me that got in the restaurant business. There was one down the street from my house I used to crack up, like, that guy has a restaurant, and then no, he doesn't. I mean, the week go away quicker sometimes. But I guess talk about give me 3 items. What's one big legend or lie?
Okay.
In launching a restaurant.
Well, the legend is in their own mind. That's what I wanted to get out of the owners. It's a very ego-driven business. So I wanted to see what those legends that they thought they were, or thought they were doing. And everybody, had that confidence in what they're doing. The liars are the guys who have not really admitted to themselves that they did something wrong. I've talked to a few restaurateurs who had to close businesses because they just didn't operate well, but they couldn't take the blame for it. They had to blame it on something else, some other outside influence. I think what my intent, like I said, my intent when I started this was to hear stories, and because it's an ego-driven business, I've heard some great stories about how they developed a concept, how they built their restaurant, where they went to find money, sometimes from family and friends, but also they had to go to the bank, and some guys have done some shady deals with people to get money. No, so that's where some of the legends come in, I think. So.
What are some of the coolest stories you've heard from a standpoint of people that have had success in the restaurant, and like something that you were like, wow, that I wouldn't have thought of that?
Well, one of the first ones, the first podcast I did, I called Panic Attack, because the owner admitted to me that they had spent close to $1 million or more building the restaurant, and it wasn't that large a restaurant, and he wasn't sure he was going to get his money back, first of all. But then about 10 days prior to opening, he's in the restaurant by himself. It's kind of getting ready to start training and get open. And he has this feeling like, what the hell did I do? Yeah. This doesn't look like I wanted it to. This is not the restaurant I wanted. And he didn't know what to do at that point. Fortunately, he calmed down. And actually, he talked with me that same week. And we kind of talked him off the ledge a little bit, because he did. He built a beautiful restaurant, and it really was a great concept. And it lasted, I think, 15 years. So, that image that you lose your confidence when you're ready to jump off the cliff.
I have a song I listen to probably once or twice a day. At the end of it says the hardest part about writing your story is knowing that you're worth the ink. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs, I mean, I've got a successful business. I know the path I'm on, but there's times you're like, but am I going the right way? And you work really, really, really hard. You're tired. You're exhausted. Something goes wrong. You're like, maybe it's all wrong. So I can definitely see that where this guy built something. It was right. He knew it was right. And then the week before, he's like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Yeah. And I've heard some sad stories too. One recent one was done with it was Max Sheets, I think it was. Chicken Max is the name of his restaurant, but he's got a long history in franchising, working with Pizza Hut and several other people. And he was in Las Vegas, I think it was, and I don't remember who he was working for, but he was called in late at night because a disgruntled employee had come in and murdered the entire crew. So it was his job to clean it up, to get get the place ready to go again within weeks afterwards. But then also deal with the families and the police and all the mess that comes with that kind of situation.
That's a book deal right there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do in my podcast is I always end it with a horror story. Okay. I ask them to tell me something that either changed their life, their career, something terrible that happened, or something that they couldn't do anything about, or something they did change, or something even funny. The one that I just put up this week with Pat Weber, the Siren Song, I call it. His horror story was that when he was young, he was working for an Italian restaurant in Jersey, and they weren't getting food out fast enough. So he and the chef got this idea to pull the thermostat out of the ovens so that they could get a hotter temperature and get the food cooked faster. Well, after about 3 days, the floorboards started to smoke and to burn. And eventually it caught fire and they had to close because the fire department came in and tore down the walls. It was burning up inside the walls. So that was kind of a funny horror story. But.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of people that have done things like that to find that shortcut. It's got to seem right.
Yeah.
This has to work. My background, I've been in marketing since '99, but for 10 years in the middle, me and my dad and brother had a boat and RV dealership. And it was comical because we ended up having 40-something employees, a 7-acre store, 700 units on a lot. And there was a lot of moving parts. And there was a couple times where, an Airstream camper came through the front window of the dealership because an employee didn't hook it to the forklift correctly. There was a time where a boat was going in front of the store on a forklift. And we had this rule for a reason. When you're moving a boat on the forklift, you have to buckle it down. You have to chain the safety chains. Well, this kid that we called Pillow, another long story, decided he didn't need any of that. And he decides to pull up a $65,000 boat in front of our store, hits a little bump, comes off, goes down a hill. And this is no joke. There's a retention pond across the street. And we always joked one day a boat would go in there. Never envisioned it would happen. And this boat goes down the thing, jumps the curve, goes down a 20-foot hill, and is in the retention pond, boat, trailer, and everything.
That's hilarious. How did you get it out of the pond?
So fortunately, an auto repair shop was next to us who did AAA towing.
Oh, okay.
And truck. And so I actually get a call from Richard. I'm coming to the store, and he goes, "Boss, you need to get here a little faster than normal." I go, "Why?" He's like, "Remember the old joke about the retention pond in a boat?" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, Richard. Like, I'm serious. There's a 26-foot Azure boat in it right now. It was a pleasure boat brand." I'm like, "No way." And I get there and the boat's gone. And I'm like, "Oh, they're screwing me." But then I look and you see the tire tracks and you see the weeds that were knocked down. And I went in and I pulled the surveillance video up, and it's the funniest video ever.
Oh, you got it in video. Oh, great.
Yeah. This was 15 years ago. I wish we had it, but it was hilarious because this is a 5,000-pound boat and trailer probably. And you see the thing come off, and then you see Pillow get off the forklift, run, grabbed the front of it like he's going to stop it, and he dragged him out of the camera all the way down the driveway. He went down the hill with the boat, let go on the curb, got a little scuff.
Oh my God!
The boat didn't get damaged, not one scratch anywhere.
Wow.
Well, it was too funny. But I think a lot of times, in whether it's restaurants or boat dealerships, there's little things like that you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I saw one the other day locally where a lady. I didn't hear the story what happened. It was an older lady. I'm assuming maybe something with medical. She drove through the front of the restaurant. She just went to pull in the parking lot and didn't stop.
Yeah, we just had one in Red Wing last night. Drunk, drove right into the front door of a restaurant that had been there for 35 years, 45 years, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was a very old restaurant, but there's stories.
I got a citation in high school. I went through the McDonald's in Erlanger, where I'm from, in my Jeep backwards. I guess it seemed like a good idea.
And they gave you a ticket for it, huh?
Yeah, McDonald's called the cops. And so the cop pulls me over after I went through, and he's like, he knew who I was because I had been pulled over before. And he's like, seriously, bro? He's like, I can give you a citation, a warning citation. I can't ticket you unless they want to press charges because it's private property. But you can't drive through drive-thrus backwards, moron. And I'm like, sorry. So I like to end your interviews with a horror story. I like to end with one piece of advice. If a restaurant owner or operator is watching this, and let's say they got the ego that Matt Platt has, they don't know wrong. They've got an idea. They're going to open a concept. They're going to do it at this location, and it's going to do $2 million next year. What's the biggest piece of advice you would give them to kind of get out of their own way or be able to look at it from a different lens?
I usually try to talk them out of it. I've lost a lot of clients that way. And I tell them, if you're ready to lose $500,000 of your own money, let's go for it. Let's do it. But if you're not at that point, you're not ready. You got to be able to have that belief that you can do it. And also you got to have the cash. You got to find somebody who's going to give you that cash if you don't have it. So.
And that's, to me, that's one thing that amazes me with businesses. And maybe it's just because we live in a country where things are easier to get than maybe they were 30 years ago. But when we opened up, like I'm leaving my office here downtown, going to a gym that I'm a partner in a couple minutes. When we opened the gym, there was 3 of us, and we committed to a dollar amount that we could sustain the business for 12 months.
Yeah.
If we didn't have a single member, we were in this game for 12 months, win, lose, or draw. And our good thing was within 2 months, we were cash flow positive, we were profitable, and it went good. But I was at a place in Florence, Kentucky the other day near my house, and there's this, I think it was called Twisted Cream or something. It's a alcohol-infused soft serve ice cream concept or something. It was Twisted Cream. And it was open, it opened like the January before COVID, and before COVID, it was closed, like maybe 2 months.
Wow.
And I was talking to one of the businesses in the complex. He's like, Matt, they didn't have a clue, apparently. He's like, apparently they weren't very well funded because they ran out of money within 2 months of opening. And I'm like, that can't be you've got to be able to, like I tell clients, of course, I'm in marketing. So I'm a marketing guy from a standpoint of marketing spin, because I think if you got a great product, you got to tell people. Does you no good not to tell somebody that you're there. But I've talked to many concepts like, hey, when you open, do me a favor. Realize it's going to cost you $5 to $6 to acquire a customer. Mm-hmm. And if you think you need 10,000 customers a month, you're going to get, let's say, maybe 5,000 organically. Where are the other 5 going to come from? Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out, how you're going to acquire them, how you're going to get them to walk in the restaurant. But you're exactly right. A lot of them are way underfunded, and they think it's going to be roses and rose petals the first month.
But in my consulting business, the novices have really been the most fun for me because I enjoy teaching them about the business when they're ready to learn. And the ones who heed my warning, we usually have a good time. Sometimes they'll get to the point, though. I had one client who spent the money he needed. He had it in his pocket to keep going if things weren't right. And he did. He kept it going until he actually had to close the doors. I mean, he didn't do totally everything I asked him to do. But, you get a client who's just soaking it in, who's just taking all this information and experience that you have. And that's when it's fun for me. So. Yeah.
Well, cool. That segued perfect. The bottom of the screen, launching a restaurant.com. Is that the way people can get a hold of you and find out more about what you do?
Absolutely. That's the best place to do it. You can do Tobie at that address and it'll get to me right away.
Cool. So make sure you guys hit up Tobie at launchingarestaurant.com. Go to launchingarestaurant.com. Check out the podcast.
Yeah.
I appreciate you hopping on here with me when I'm in Minneapolis next week. I'll hit you. Maybe we can grab a cup of coffee and learn a little more about each other.
That'd be great. Love to do it.
Thanks, Tobie.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Bye.